You stand at the center of an arena where only one law governs all outcomes. Someone will be ruthless. The only question is whether that someone will be you or everyone else. There is no neutral ground in this reality, no safe space where gentle souls can hide from the fundamental brutality of existence. You will either become your own harshest critic and most demanding taskmaster, or the world will assume that role with far less mercy than you could ever show yourself. Tonight, we confront the most uncomfortable truth about human existence, that weakness is not just personally limiting, it is socially punished with a cruelty that makes personal discipline seem like compassion by comparison. The person who refuses to be ruthless with themselves becomes prey for everyone who has mastered the art of ruthlessness. For your entire life you have been sold the beautiful lie that being gentle with yourself is healthy, that self-compassion leads to growth, that accepting your limitations is wisdom. You've been taught that pushing yourself too hard is toxic, that demanding excellence from yourself is perfectionism, that expecting more than you currently deliver is unrealistic and harmful. But while you were learning to be kind to yourself, others were learning to be ruthless. While you were practicing self-acceptance, they were practicing self-transformation. While you were told to love yourself as you are, they were becoming people worthy of respect, fear, and admiration. Over the next hour, we will expose the devastating cost of self-kindness, the necessity of internal ruthlessness, and the brutal reality that those who will not govern themselves harshly will be governed harshly by forces beyond their control. You will discover that self-discipline is not cruelty, but the only protection against a world that shows no mercy to the unprepared, the undisciplined, and the weak. By the end of this exploration, you will understand that the choice facing you is binary and urgent. Be ruthless with yourself, or watch others be ruthless with you while you remain powerless to stop them. Human social reality operates as a sophisticated predatory system where strength is rewarded and weakness is exploited with mechanical precision. This is not a moral judgment or a cynical observation. It is a descriptive fact about how human hierarchies form, how resources are distributed, and how power flows through social networks. Those who possess strength, capability, and discipline naturally rise to positions where they control outcomes, make decisions, and determine how resources are allocated. Those who lack these qualities naturally fall into positions where they are managed, directed, and used by others for purposes they did not choose and may not understand. This social predation operates through multiple mechanisms that most people never recognize because they've been conditioned to believe in fairness, equality, and mutual support that exists only in idealistic theory. In practice, every social environment, from families to corporations to entire societies, organizes itself around the domination of the strong over the weak. Consider how this plays out in professional environments. The person who disciplines themselves to develop valuable skills naturally attracts opportunities, recognition, and advancement. They become indispensable because they can solve problems that others cannot solve, handle responsibilities that others cannot handle, and deliver results that others cannot deliver. Meanwhile, the person who is gentle with themselves, who accepts their current limitations, who practices self-compassion instead of self-improvement, finds themselves in positions where their value is limited and easily replaced. They become dependent on others' goodwill, vulnerable to others' decisions, and subject to forces they cannot influence or control. The cruel irony is that the self-compassionate person often experiences more suffering than the self-disciplined person because they remain vulnerable to external threats while never developing the capabilities that would protect them from those threats. They choose immediate comfort over long-term security and discover that this choice leads to long-term discomfort that they cannot escape. In romantic relationships, the same predatory dynamics operate with devastating effectiveness. The person who has been ruthless with themselves, who has developed their attractiveness, their capabilities, their emotional strength, naturally attracts partners who enhance their life and treats them with respect born from recognition of their value. The person who practices self-acceptance without self-improvement often attracts partners who sense their weakness and exploit it. They find themselves in relationships with people who take more than they give, who demand accommodation without offering reciprocity, who treat them poorly because they sense that poor treatment will be tolerated. The self-compassionate person tells themselves they deserve love just as they are, but the reality of attraction, desire, and relationship dynamics operates according to different principles. People are attracted to strength, capability, and value. They may temporarily engage with weakness out of pity or convenience, but they do not respect it, commit to it, or remain loyal to it when better options become available. Social predation also operates through what economists call value extraction, the process by which those who create little value survive by taking value from those who create more. This extraction happens continuously and automatically in environments where some people are productive while others are not. The disciplined person who develops valuable capabilities finds themselves constantly asked to cover for undisciplined colleagues, to solve problems created by others' lack of preparation, to compensate for others' failures through their own additional effort. Their strength becomes a resource that others consume without acknowledgement or reciprocal contribution. This value extraction accelerates when the disciplined person practices kindness and accommodation. Their willingness to help others becomes permission for others to depend on them. Their competence becomes an excuse for others to remain incompetent. Their reliability becomes a foundation for others' irresponsibility. The predatory system rewards this dynamic because it allows organizations and communities to function despite having members who contribute little value. The strong subsidize the weak's presence while the weak gradually claim more resources and make greater demands on the systems that their weakness helps to burden. Perhaps most insidiously, social predation operates through guilt and obligation systems that convince the strong to feel responsible for the weak's outcomes. The capable person is told that their advantages create obligations to help those with fewer advantages. The disciplined person is made to feel selfish for prioritizing their own development over others' immediate needs. These guilt systems ensure that strength serves weakness rather than creating more strength, that capability subsidizes incapability rather than inspiring greater capability, that discipline compensates for others' lack of discipline rather than motivating disciplinary development. The result is a systematic transfer of resources from those who create value to those who consume value, from those who solve problems to those who create problems, from those who take responsibility for outcomes to those who avoid responsibility while benefiting from others' responsibility. This transfer happens not through conscious exploitation, but through the natural dynamics of social systems where strength gravitates towards supporting weakness until strength is exhausted and weakness becomes normalized as acceptable and inevitable. The person who refuses to be ruthless with themselves becomes part of this predatory ecosystem, not as a predator, but as prey. Their gentleness with themselves becomes permission for others to be harsh with them. Their self-acceptance becomes an invitation for others to reject them. When rejection serves others' interests, their self-compassion becomes a weakness that others exploit without reciprocal compassion. Self-betrayal is the foundation of all external exploitation. Before anyone else can take advantage of you, use your resources for their benefit, or treat you with less respect than you deserve, you must first betray yourself by failing to demand excellence from your own thoughts, actions, and results. This betrayal typically begins with small compromises that feel reasonable and compassionate. You allow yourself to skip workouts because you're tired. You permit yourself to avoid difficult conversations because they create anxiety. You excuse yourself from challenging projects because they might lead to failure or criticism. Each individual compromise seems minor and justifiable. You tell yourself that one missed workout doesn't matter, that avoiding one difficult conversation is reasonable self-care, that declining one challenging opportunity is simply being realistic about your current capabilities. But these small compromises compound into patterns of self-betrayal that systematically erode your capability, confidence, and value in all contexts. The person who cannot be trusted to keep commitments to themselves cannot be trusted by others to keep commitments in important situations. The erosion happens gradually and often invisibly. You begin accepting lower standards from yourself in private, which inevitably leads to accepting lower standards in public. You start making excuses for poor performance in areas that don't seem immediately consequential, which creates mental habits that extend to areas that are highly consequential. The self-betrayer develops what psychologists call learned helplessness, not through external trauma, but through internal accommodation of their own weakness. They learn that they cannot rely on themselves to follow through on commitments, so they stop making commitments that would develop their capabilities. They discover that they cannot trust themselves to maintain discipline when discipline becomes difficult, so they avoid situations that would require sustained discipline. They realize that they cannot depend on themselves to perform under pressure, so they arrange their lives to minimize pressure rather than developing pressure resistance. This learned helplessness becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that makes the person increasingly vulnerable to external control and exploitation. They cannot advocate effectively for themselves because they have no evidence that they deserve better treatment. They cannot negotiate from strength because they have not developed strength that would support confident negotiation. Self-betrayal also operates through what we might call comfort-seeking, the tendency to choose immediate ease over long-term benefit whenever these values conflict. The self-betrayer prioritizes feeling good now over being capable later, avoiding discomfort today over building resilience for tomorrow, maintaining current comfort levels over creating future opportunities. This comfort-seeking creates what researchers call delayed discounting, the tendency to value immediate rewards more highly than larger future rewards. The self-betrayer chooses the small immediate pleasure of avoiding difficulty over the large future reward of developed capability. Consider how this pattern affects career development. The self-betrayer chooses jobs that feel comfortable over jobs that would develop valuable skills. They avoid networking because social interaction feels awkward, decline challenging assignments because failure seems embarrassing, and resist learning new technologies because the learning curve creates temporary incompetence. Each comfort-seeking choice reduces their future options while feeling reasonable in the moment. They maintain their current comfort level while systematically destroying their potential for enhanced future comfort through greater capability and opportunity. In personal relationships, self-betrayal manifests as the failure to maintain standards that would attract and retain high-quality connections. The self-betrayer tolerates disrespectful treatment because confrontation feels uncomfortable. They maintain relationships with people who drain their energy because ending those relationships requires difficult conversations. They sacrifice their authentic interests to accommodate others' preferences because asserting their own needs creates social tension. They apologize for their advantages and achievements because confident self-presentation might trigger others' insecurity. This accommodation teaches others to treat them with less respect because they demonstrate through their behavior that they do not respect themselves enough to maintain consistent standards. The self-betrayer trains others to take advantage of them by showing that advantage-taking will be tolerated and even enabled. Perhaps most destructively, self-betrayal operates through what we might call potential abandonment, the gradual relinquishing of authentic goals and aspirations in favor of more realistic expectations that require less risk, effort, and personal growth. The self-betrayer begins with genuine ambitions, but slowly negotiates those ambitions downward. Each time pursuing them requires uncomfortable action. They want to start a business, but decide employment is more secure. They want to develop creative talents, but conclude that practical careers are more responsible. They want to travel and experience adventure, but determine that routine and safety are more mature choices. This potential abandonment happens gradually and is often dressed in the language of wisdom, maturity, and responsibility. But it represents a fundamental betrayal of the person they could become in favor of maintaining the comfort of the person they currently are. The abandoned potential doesn't disappear. It becomes a source of chronic dissatisfaction, resentment, and regret that poisons their experience of the realistic life they chose instead. They feel unfulfilled but cannot identify why, because they've convinced themselves that their limitations represent wisdom rather than betrayal. The self-betrayer also develops what therapists call external attribution, the tendency to blame external circumstances for outcomes that resulted from internal choices. They explain their limited success through bad luck, unfair systems, others' advantages, or circumstances beyond their control, rather than acknowledging their own contribution to their outcomes through self-betrayal. This external attribution prevents them from learning from their experiences and developing greater capability because they never acknowledge the connection between their choices and their results. They remain trapped in cycles of self-betrayal while feeling like victims of forces beyond their influence. The cumulative effect of chronic self-betrayal is the creation of a person who cannot trust themselves, cannot rely on their own promises, cannot perform under pressure, and cannot command respect from others because they have systematically destroyed the foundation of self-respect through countless small compromises with excellence. This person becomes vulnerable to everyone who has not betrayed themselves in similar ways. They become prey for those who have maintained their standards, developed their capabilities, and earned the confidence that comes from keeping difficult commitments to themselves. The alternative to self-betrayal is not self-improvement or self-development. It is self-ruthlessness. This ruthlessness is not cruelty, but precision, not punishment, but accountability, not harshness, but the recognition that your future depends entirely on your willingness to demand excellence from yourself, when excellence feels impossible to deliver. Self-ruthlessness begins with the recognition that no one else cares about your potential as much as you do, and that if you do not develop that potential through disciplined effort, it will remain forever unrealized. The world is not waiting for you to become ready. It is offering opportunities to those who are already prepared. This ruthlessness requires what military training calls standards without exceptions, the maintenance of non-negotiable minimums regardless of circumstances, feelings, or temporary obstacles. The ruthless person establishes what they will do and then does it whether they feel like it or not, whether it's convenient or not, whether others understand or approve or not. These standards cannot be flexible or negotiable because flexibility becomes the pathway through which self-betrayal returns. The moment you create exceptions for yourself, you create precedents that make future exceptions feel reasonable and inevitable. The ruthless person trains when they don't feel like training, because discipline is most valuable when it's most difficult to maintain. They have difficult conversations when they feel anxious, because growth happens at the edge of comfort zones. They pursue challenging opportunities when they feel uncertain, because uncertainty indicates the presence of learning and development opportunities. This ruthlessness extends to emotional management. The ruthless person does not allow their feelings to determine their actions because emotions are temporary states, while results are permanent consequences. They acknowledge emotional responses as information while making decisions based on strategic analysis of what serves their long-term development. When they feel afraid, they ask what specific actions fear is trying to prevent, and then take those actions with heightened attention to risk management. When they feel angry, they analyze what the anger reveals about their values or boundaries, while choosing responses that serve their strategic interests rather than their emotional impulses. When they feel sad or disappointed, they process those emotions while maintaining productive activity, rather than allowing emotional states to justify abandoning their standards and commitments. They treat emotions as weather, temporary conditions that provide information but do not determine travel plans. Self-ruthlessness also requires what entrepreneurs call result-focused rather than effort-focused evaluation. The ruthless person measures themselves based on what they accomplish rather than how hard they try, what they produce rather than what they intend, what they deliver rather than what they promise. This result-focused evaluation eliminates the self-deception that allows people to feel good about their efforts while accepting poor outcomes. The ruthless person is not satisfied with trying hard. They demand results that demonstrate competence, value creation, and progress toward their authentic goals. They analyze their failures without emotion, identify the specific factors that prevented success, and modify their approach until they achieve the outcomes they want. They do not waste time on self-pity, blame, or justification, because these emotional responses consume energy that could be directed towards solution development and performance improvement. In professional contexts, self-ruthlessness means developing capabilities that make you indispensable rather than hoping others will recognize your potential without evidence. The ruthless person becomes exceptionally good at specific, valuable skills rather than remaining generally competent at many things. They seek feedback actively and implement improvements immediately, rather than avoiding criticism or defending their current performance level. They pursue challenging assignments that develop their abilities rather than comfortable roles that maintain their current competence. They build relationships strategically with people who can enhance their capabilities and opportunities, rather than maintaining social connections based purely on comfort and familiarity. They invest their time and energy in activities that compound into greater future opportunities, rather than activities that provide immediate gratification without strategic benefit. In personal development, self-ruthlessness means eliminating habits, relationships, and activities that drain energy without providing proportional value. The ruthless person audits their time allocation, relationship investments, and attention expenditures with the same analytical rigor that successful businesses apply to resource management. They end friendships that no longer serve mutual growth. They eliminate entertainment activities that provide temporary pleasure without long-term benefit. They restructure their environment to support their goals rather than accommodating their weaknesses. They invest in education, training, and experiences that develop valuable capabilities rather than spending resources on consumption that provides temporary satisfaction without lasting value. They treat their personal development as seriously as professional investors treat their portfolios. Perhaps most importantly, self-ruthlessness requires what we might call future self-advocacy, making current decisions based on what would serve the person you want to become, rather than what feels comfortable for the person you currently are. The ruthless person asks, what would the future version of myself, the one who has achieved the goals I want to achieve, do in this situation? They then take those actions regardless of whether those actions feel natural or comfortable for their current level of development. This future self-advocacy creates a systematic bias toward choices that develop capability, build strength, and create opportunities rather than choices that maintain comfort, avoid challenge, or preserve current limitations. The ruthless person understands that their current self is not their final self, that their current capabilities are not their ultimate capabilities, and that their current comfort zone is not their permanent boundary. They treat their present limitations as temporary constraints to be overcome rather than permanent features to be accommodated. This ruthlessness is not self-hatred or self-punishment. It is self-respect expressed through the demand for excellence. The person who is truly ruthless with themselves is actually demonstrating the highest form of self-love because they refuse to accept anything less than their full potential. While you debate whether to be gentle or ruthless with yourself, the world has already made its choice. Every social and professional environment operates as a testing ground that continuously evaluates your strength, discipline, and capability. Those who pass these tests receive opportunities, respect, and resources. Those who fail become resources that others consume. This testing happens constantly and often invisibly. Employers test whether you can deliver results under pressure. Romantic partners test whether you maintain attractive qualities or gradually become complacent. Friends test whether you provide value to their lives or merely consume their time and attention. Social groups test whether you contribute to their success or drain their energy. Competitors test whether you can defend your position or can be displaced through superior performance. Even family members test whether you can be relied upon or need to be managed and accommodated. The person who has not been ruthless with themselves fails these tests systematically because they lack the internal discipline, capability, and strength that external challenges require. They discover that gentleness with themselves becomes harshness from others when others must compensate for their deficiencies. In professional environments, the consequences of internal weakness manifest as career stagnation, limited opportunities, and dependence on others' decisions. The undisciplined person finds themselves in positions where they execute others' plans rather than creating their own plans, where they respond to others' initiatives rather than generating their own initiatives. They become vulnerable to economic downturns, organizational changes, and market shifts because they have not developed the capabilities that would make them valuable in multiple contexts. Their career depends on others' willingness to maintain their position rather than on their indispensability to organizational success. When layoffs occur, when departments are restructured, when companies merge or fail, the undisciplined person discovers that their gentleness with themselves has created no protection against external ruthlessness. They are eliminated, not out of malice, but because they have made themselves eliminable through their failure to become exceptional at anything valuable. In romantic relationships, internal weakness creates what researchers call attraction decay, the gradual loss of desirability that occurs when someone becomes complacent about their physical condition, emotional stability, and capability development. The partner who attracted someone through specific qualities but then stops maintaining those qualities discovers that attraction is not permanent or unconditional. The person who becomes physically unfit, emotionally needy, or professionally stagnant while expecting their partner to remain attracted and committed learns that relationships operate according to value exchange principles rather than unconditional love principles. Their partner may remain out of obligation or habit, but the passion, respect, and genuine desire that characterize the relationship's beginning gradually disappear. Even worse, the internally weak person often attracts partners who recognize their weakness and exploit it. They find themselves in relationships with people who take advantage of their accommodation, who demand constant emotional labor without reciprocal support, who treat them poorly because they sense that poor treatment will be tolerated. The accommodation that the weak person provides becomes permission for others to behave badly. Their willingness to accept less than they deserve teaches others to provide less than they could provide. Their failure to maintain standards creates relationships based on others' convenience rather than mutual respect. In social contexts, internal weakness manifests as what sociologists call social marginalization, the gradual exclusion from influential networks and important opportunities. Strong people naturally gravitate toward other strong people because strength enhances strength through mutual challenge and support. The weak person finds themselves excluded not through conscious discrimination, but through natural selection processes that favor capability, reliability, and value creation. They are not invited to important gatherings, not included in significant projects, not considered for leadership roles because their weakness makes them unsuitable for contexts that require strength. This social marginalization accelerates over time as strong people build networks with other strong people, while weak people are left to associate primarily with other weak people. The weak person's social environment becomes a collection of individuals who reinforce weakness rather than challenge it, who enable limitation rather than inspire growth. Financial consequences of internal weakness often prove most devastating because money provides protection against many forms of external ruthlessness. The undisciplined person struggles financially, not primarily due to income limitations, but due to their inability to manage money effectively, invest wisely, or develop skills that command higher compensation. Their financial weakness makes them vulnerable to economic exploitation, unable to take advantage of opportunities that require capital, and dependent on others for security that they could have created through disciplined wealth building. They discover that financial weakness amplifies every other form of weakness because it limits options and creates dependency. Even family relationships become strained when internal weakness creates burdens that family members must bear. The undisciplined person may expect family support without reciprocal contribution, emotional accommodation without emotional stability, and financial assistance without financial responsibility. Family members gradually lose respect for someone who consistently fails to meet their own standards while expecting others to compensate for their deficiencies. The family relationships that the weak person hoped would provide unconditional support become sources of tension, disappointment, and eventual rejection. Perhaps most tragically, Internal weakness creates what psychologists call learned helplessness that becomes self-perpetuating. The person who fails external tests begins to expect failure, which reduces their effort in future challenges, which increases the likelihood of additional failures. They develop narratives about why success is impossible for them. Bad luck, unfair systems, others' advantages, circumstances beyond their control. These narratives protect them from acknowledging their role in their outcomes, but also prevent them from making changes that could improve their circumstances. The externally imposed consequences of internal weakness eventually become internalized as permanent limitations. The person stops attempting challenges that could develop their capabilities because they expect to fail based on previous failures that resulted from their lack of preparation rather than their lack of potential. This creates a downward spiral where weakness creates failure, failure reinforces weakness, and reinforced weakness makes future failure increasingly likely. The person becomes trapped in a cycle of limitation that feels imposed by external forces, but actually results from their internal refusal to be ruthless with themselves. Transforming from self-betrayal to self-ruthlessness requires a systematic approach that eliminates the emotional decision-making and comfort-seeking that created internal weakness. This transformation cannot happen through inspiration, motivation, or good intentions. It requires implementing specific protocols that force behavioral changes regardless of emotional states or temporary obstacles. The first protocol involves what military training calls non-negotiable standards establishment. You must identify specific, measurable behaviors that you will perform regardless of circumstances, feelings, or external pressures. These standards must be concrete enough to evaluate objectively and important enough to create meaningful development. Examples might include training for a specific duration each day, regardless of schedule conflicts, completing a defined amount of productive work before allowing recreational activities, maintaining specific personal grooming and appearance standards regardless of social context, or investing a set percentage of income regardless of temporary financial pressures. These standards must be absolute rather than flexible, because flexibility provides pathways for self-betrayal to return. The moment you create exceptions, you establish precedents that make future exceptions feel reasonable and inevitable. The second protocol requires implementing what behavioral psychologists call environmental design, structuring your physical and social environment to support disciplined behavior while eliminating triggers for weak behavior. This means removing or restricting access to things that enable self-betrayal while increasing access to things that support excellence. Remove foods that prevent you from maintaining physical standards. Eliminate entertainment that consumes time without providing value. End relationships with people who encourage or enable weak behavior. Restructure your living and working spaces to support productive activity rather than comfortable inactivity. Add books, courses, and information sources that develop valuable knowledge. Create relationships with people who maintain high standards and expect excellence from themselves and others. Join groups and activities that require consistent performance and development. The third protocol involves what performance coaches call result-focused tracking, systematic measurement of outcomes rather than efforts. You must establish metrics that accurately reflect progress toward your goals and evaluate your performance based on these metrics rather than on your intentions or efforts. This means tracking income, fitness levels, skill development, and relationship quality through objective measures rather than subjective feelings. You cannot manage what you don't measure, and you cannot be ruthless with yourself if you don't have clear data about your actual performance versus your desired performance. The fourth protocol requires implementing what successful entrepreneurs call failure analysis and rapid iteration, systematic examination of poor results, followed by immediate strategy modification. When you fail to meet your standards or achieve your objectives, you must analyze the specific factors that prevented success and modify your approach immediately. This analysis must be emotional rather than emotional. You cannot waste energy on self-pity, blame, or justification, because these emotional responses prevent learning and improvement. You must treat failures as data that provides information about what doesn't work. Then use that information to develop approaches that do work. The fifth protocol involves what elite performers call discomfort tolerance training, deliberately seeking situations that create anxiety, uncertainty, and challenge, because these situations develop the psychological resilience necessary for high-level performance. You must become comfortable being uncomfortable, because growth happens at the edge of comfort zones. This means pursuing opportunities that feel scary, having conversations that create anxiety, taking on projects that stretch your current capabilities, and placing yourself in situations where failure is possible, but success would create significant advancement. The sixth protocol requires what psychologists call delayed gratification optimization, consistently choosing long-term benefits over short-term pleasures when these values conflict. This means developing the ability to sacrifice immediate comfort for future advantage, present pleasure for future capability, and current ease for future opportunity. This optimization must become automatic rather than requiring conscious decision-making, because conscious decisions are influenced by temporary emotional states. You must establish systems that create long-term benefits while making short-term sacrifices feel routine rather than difficult. The seventh protocol involves what military strategists call contingency planning, preparing for multiple possible scenarios rather than hoping that circumstances will remain favorable to your current approach. You must develop backup plans, alternative strategies, and emergency protocols that enable you to maintain your standards regardless of external changes. This planning includes financial reserves that provide independence during economic uncertainty, skill development that makes you valuable in multiple industries, and relationship networks that provide opportunities when current arrangements change. The eighth protocol requires what successful people call mentor and accountability system development, building relationships with people who have achieved what you want to achieve and who will hold you accountable for maintaining your standards, even when you don't want to maintain them. These relationships must be based on mutual respect and value exchange rather than dependency or charity. You must provide value to people whose guidance and accountability you seek, and you must accept their feedback and challenges even when they contradict your preferences or comfort. The final protocol involves what we might call identity transformation, changing your self-concept from someone who tries hard to someone who delivers results, from someone with good intentions to someone with proven capabilities, from someone who hopes things will improve to someone who makes things improve. This identity change happens through consistent action that proves to yourself that you can be relied upon to meet your commitments, regardless of circumstances. Each time you maintain your standards, when maintaining them is difficult, you provide evidence that supports a stronger self-concept. Over time, these protocols create what researchers call self-efficacy, the confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever challenges arise because you have proven your ability to maintain discipline under pressure. This self-efficacy becomes the foundation for all external success because it enables you to take risks, pursue opportunities, and maintain standards that less disciplined people cannot sustain. You have now seen the complete architecture of human social reality. You understand that strength attracts opportunity while weakness attracts exploitation, that discipline creates options while accommodation eliminates them, that those who govern themselves harshly escape the harsh governance of others, while those who are gentle with themselves become victims of others' ruthlessness. The choice before you is immediate and permanent. Every day you postpone becoming ruthless with yourself is another day that others become more ruthless with you. Every moment you spend hoping that gentleness will be rewarded is a moment that others use to develop the capabilities that will make them indispensable, while you remain replaceable. This choice cannot be postponed until you feel ready, until circumstances improve, or until you have more time, energy, or resources. The world is not waiting for your preparation. It is testing your performance right now, every day, in every interaction, through every opportunity you pursue or avoid. If you choose to remain gentle with yourself, understand completely what you are accepting. You are choosing to be managed by others who have been ruthless with themselves. You are accepting that your options will be limited by your own lack of development. You are agreeing to remain vulnerable to external forces because you refuse to develop internal strength. You will find yourself in jobs that others design, relationships that others control, circumstances that others determine. You will spend your life reacting to others' initiatives rather than creating your own opportunities. You will discover that the gentleness you showed yourself becomes the harshness that others show you when your weakness becomes inconvenient to their success. But if you choose self-ruthlessness, if you decide to demand excellence from yourself, regardless of how that demand feels, you begin the transformation from prey to predator, from managed to managing, from vulnerable to powerful. You will discover that the harshness you show yourself becomes the respect that others show you when they recognize that you cannot be taken advantage of. You will find that the standards you maintain for yourself become the standards that others meet when interacting with you, because you have demonstrated that lower standards are unacceptable. You will develop the capabilities that make you valuable in any circumstance, the discipline that enables you to perform under any pressure, and the strength that allows you to help others from a position of power rather than needing help from a position of weakness. Be ruthless with yourself, or be devoured by others. Demand excellence from yourself, or have mediocrity imposed upon you. Develop strength through discipline, or experience weakness through accommodation. The choice is yours, but the consequences are certain. The predators are waiting to see what you decide. The predators are always circling. They sense weakness with instinctive accuracy and exploit it with mechanical efficiency. They are not evil. They are simply stronger, more disciplined, and more ruthless with themselves than you have been. They have earned the right to control circumstances because they developed the capabilities that create control. You can join their ranks, but only by becoming ruthless with yourself first, only by developing the internal discipline that creates external options, only by demanding from yourself the excellence that others will eventually demand from you anyway, but with far less patience and consideration than you could show yourself. The world is not fair, and it is not gentle. It rewards strength and punishes weakness with perfect consistency. It provides opportunities to those who are prepared and eliminates those who are not ready when readiness is required. You were not born to be prey. You were not created to be managed, controlled, or consumed by others who developed the capabilities that you avoided developing. You were not designed to live at others' mercy while hoping that mercy will be sufficient to protect you from a reality that operates according to strength rather than kindness.